Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome, everyone. The world's 10 best travel destinations for 2026. You know how these lists usually go, right? Pretty pictures, lots of nice adjectives, but maybe not much substance behind the why now. But the sources we've pulled together here, we're talking industry reports, forecasts, even localized investment trackers. They've given us something much more specific, almost like strategic intelligence, you could say. So our mission today isn't just to list 10 beautiful places. No, we want to extract the really high-value reasons why 2026 is flagged as the optimal time to visit these particular spots. We're talking about tangible, scheduled developments. We're really hunting for those strategic sweet spots,
Things like major infrastructure upgrades coming online, big cultural events that are specific to that year, maybe new sustainability initiatives taking root, or even unique political or economic shifts that just fundamentally change the experience in 2026. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to being really well informed about global tourism strategy.
Exactly. And for you listening, the goal here is absolutely about recognizing the patterns. We want to categorize this list of 10 destinations so you can really grasp the strategic drivers behind where global travel development is heading for 2026. The sources, they really show a clear, quite deliberate investment strategy happening globally. We've managed to isolate, I think, three main patterns here. First, you've got destinations investing heavily in modern tech, big events, and just making things run smoothly, logistical efficiency. Then there are those really committed to, let's call it radical sustainability, preservation, managing crowds better. And third, you see places focusing on optimizing for new kinds of travelers, these sort of lifestyle travelers like digital nomads. Knowing which category a country falls into tells you precisely what kind of trip 2026 is really optimized for there. Is it, a quick high energy cultural hit?
All right.
Or maybe a seamless cross-country trip thanks to new infrastructure?
Good.
Or is it more about a slow, ethical immersion? So we're laser focused on that why it matters now piece.
Fantastic. Yeah, the structure gives us a really clear roadmap. So let's just jump right into that first category then. The destinations that are leading with investment in speed, technology, and these strategic events, we're calling this group, the cultural hubs and technological frontiers. These are the places either pushing innovation or using huge infrastructure improvements to redefine efficiency. Our sources are highlighting Japan, South Korea, Spain, and Italy in this bucket. Let's kick off with Japan, which is number one on the list we're looking at. Now, Japan, it's always a top choice, isn't it? Known for that incredible mix of, hyper-modern cities and absolute stunning nature. But the specific hook for 2026, the reason it's highlighted now, is the expectation that it's going to be even more exciting because of the planned introduction of new tech attractions.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is that Japan is always iterating, always updating. But these scheduled 2026 tech attractions, they don't sound like just, minor museum updates. The sources suggest they signal a renewed focus on really sensory, immersive experiences, stuff designed to captivate travelers, maybe especially after the pandemic years. We could be talking about more integration of things like spatial computing, maybe advanced robotics demonstrations popping up in public spaces, or even the opening of major new digital art venues.
Wow. Okay, so not just gadgets, but whole environments.
Exactly. Think expansions in the style of those huge interactive digital art installations, team lab projects, but maybe even more advanced, or perhaps permanent fixtures integrated right into high-end shopping or entertainment districts.
Yeah.
The idea is that these become destinations in themselves. Now, this means for you, the 2026 traveler, you've got to dedicate some serious pre-trip research and booking efforts. You'll need to secure entry to these experiences. They often operate on those complex timed entry ticketing systems, right? It adds a layer of scarcity, maybe. A challenge layered onto the abundance of things to do.
That immediately changes the whole planning dynamic, doesn't it? It's not just about getting your bullet train pass or booking a traditional inn or ryokan. Suddenly,
It's about securing a slot in some kind of revolutionary digital world. You have to actually plan your travel around the operating hours and the limited capacity of these high-demand tech experiences. And you got to make sure you still carve out enough time, as the sources emphasize, to get both that exhilarating modern Tokyo vibe and the quiet, the tranquility of Kyoto's old temples and gardens. That contrast is still absolutely key.
Precisely. Yeah, the Japan itinerary for 2026 looks like a study in, well, temporal and cultural whiplash. You're moving seamlessly from almost robotic efficiency one moment to centuries-old tradition the next. So if Japan is about blending tradition with the absolute newest tech, then South Korea, which comes in at number 7 on our list, is maybe more about immediate high-octane energy, cultural satiation, almost the opposite of slow travel.
Right, South Korea. The core appeal there is just that immense energy, isn't it? And its global cultural impact right now. K-pop, K-food, it's huge. But the specific 2026 focus, according to the sources, is very concentrated on events. They specifically mentioned Seoul hosting new art festivals and also some significant global tech events in 2026. So this feels like a calendar-driven opportunity, not just something that's always there.
And that raises a critical question you need to ask yourself. Planning a trip, is the benefit worth the trade-off? Because hosting a major global tech symposium or a huge K-pop summit, or maybe a large-scale art biennale, which the sources seem to suggest is happening well, that absolutely guarantees peak cultural immersion. You get that buzz, that energy. You're seeing the city at its most dynamic. However, as noted in the materials we reviewed, it also means really high competition for hotels for accommodation and potentially transportation bottlenecks, traffic jams, crowded subways, especially around those specific event zones.
Yeah, that sounds like a potentially significant downside for maybe the average traveler. If the city's at peak vibrancy, it's probably also at peak price and peak stress levels. So if your goal is that rapid cultural hit, 2026 definitely delivers with these events. But as the learner planning this, you have to be ready to commit to booking very early. We're talking maybe 9, even 12 months out, just to try and mitigate some of that logistical friction that comes with hosting multiple big global events.
Absolutely. The whole traveler experience package there is incredibly dense. You can be exploring traditional villages, soaking up K-pop vibes, trying amazing K-food, maybe all on the same day. The events scheduled for 2026 just amplify that existing vibrancy. They position South Korea and Seoul in particular as potentially the definitive year for experiencing the absolute pinnacle of Korean soft power and its tech capability.
Yeah.
It's a real feast for the senses, but yeah, it demands some pretty aggressive scheduling on your part.
Okay, moving on to country number 8 on the list. We pivot here quite completely, actually, from high-tech events towards structural efficiency. We're talking about Spain. Spain is described quite simply as a joy for travelers. You get the sunshine, the history, incredible food. And that diversity is key, isn't it? Barcelona, Madrid, Seville, they all feel so different. But the specific 2026 focus here is this huge logistical advantage, the introduction of new high-speed train lines. The goal is to make travel across the country faster and easier. This is what we're calling the infrastructure hook.
Right, and this is where that actionable intelligence for itinerary planning really kicks in for you, the listener. Spain already has a fantastic high-speed rail network, the AVE. It's one of the best. But the sources are pointing to specific scheduled expansions, either completing or becoming fully integrated by 2026. And these aren't just minor tweaks. They sound transformative for planning cross-country trips. We're likely looking at enhanced connectivity, linking up regions that were previously a bit disparate, maybe harder to combine easily.
Could you give an example of what that might mean geographically?
Sure. Think about the impact. If a new high-speed line significantly cuts the travel time, say, from Madrid out on the Central Plateau down into maybe Galicia in the northwest, or maybe further connects the Mediterranean coast with some of the southern regions more directly, if that happens, The potential for putting together a single comprehensive 2-week itinerary just explodes.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, a trip covering, let's say, Madrid, Barcelona, and Santiago de Compostela in the Northwest might have involved domestic flights, which add hassle and cost, or multiple long, kind of complex train changes.
Ah, I
Yeah.
see. So instead of being sort of forced into doing deep dives in just one or two regions because travel between them is too slow or awkward,
Mm-hmm.
the 2026 infrastructure makes it actually viable to seamlessly stitch together the capital, the Catalan coast, maybe those more remote, rugged historical sites up in the north, all within a standard vacation window. That fundamentally redefines your travel radius. It lets you maximize that regional diversity the source mentions. It's a massive practical benefit, saves time, probably saves money too.
And crucially, this efficiency boost, it also changes your accommodation strategy. Think about it. Instead of spending precious travel time packing up and moving hotels every 2 nights, the improved speed could allow you to maybe establish a central hub, perhaps in Madrid or Barcelona, and then execute these really ambitious day trips to cities that were previously just a bit too far, just out of comfortable reach. This caters perfectly to the traveler, the learner, who wants to maximize the sights they see while minimizing that logistical stress of constantly being on the move.
That is a fantastic structural advantage, really practical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's look at the last one in this group, country number 2, Italy. The classic appeal, it's undeniable. Pasta, art, romance, history, it's all there. However, the specific 2026 focus signals a huge, almost structural shift in their approach, a major national focus on sustainable tourism. This is the eco-conscious hook, and it feels like a direct response to that global problem of over-tourism we hear so much about.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, Italy's commitment here really reflects necessity, doesn't it? Especially in those incredibly popular and often quite fragile locations, thinking Cinque Terre, Venice, the major cultural sites in Florence and Rome. The source material is very clear about what this means for you, the traveler. This focus translates into aiming for fewer crowds and hopefully better local experiences. But the key question is, how is this actually achieved? That's the detail the learner needs, right? How does sustainability translate into practice? Well, sustainability in this context, it likely involves tangible mechanisms. We're probably seeing widespread adoption of advanced reservation systems for the really popular sites. Think the Uffizi Gallery, the Colosseum, with strict daily quotas being enforced, possibly quite rigorously by 2026. We've already seen examples like that proposed entry fee for day trippers going into Venice. This isn't just a vague suggestion, it seems to be a strategic effort to both monetize access, frankly, and control the flow of people.
But doesn't that potentially massive downside limiting access, increasing fees, doesn't that sort of negate the benefit for the average traveler, making it harder and more expensive to see the main things?
It definitely creates friction, yes. No doubt about that. But the intended benefit is quality. The argument is, by reducing the sheer number of people crammed into a space, you improve the experience for those who do get in. And furthermore, the sustainable focus is explicitly about redirecting travelers, getting them away from those heavily saturated central routes, those main tourist arteries. The sources really emphasize visiting smaller towns, places like Siena, exploring the Amalfi Coast beyond the absolute hotspots, or maybe looking at regions like Puglia or Umbria, which are beautiful but less overrun. These areas are being actively promoted, partly to spread the economic benefit of tourism more widely and, crucially, to alleviate the intense pressure on the major hubs.
Okay, so the smart traveler, the wise traveler in Italy in 2026, isn't just focusing on Rome or Venice. They're perhaps looking for that agriturismo stay, a farm stay in a less trammeled spot. Maybe seeking out local guides, using those regional recommendations from the tourism boards to try and capture that high-quality, crowd-managed, sustainable experience that this new Italian strategy is trying to promote. So the key takeaway here seems to be expect quotas for the big names, Plan well ahead for those, and definitely look inland or maybe further south for potentially more rewarding, less crowded experiences.
Absolutely. And the sustainable movement often involves supporting local, smaller scale economies too, focusing on responsible waste management, energy use. For you, the learner, this means consciously choosing experiences that aren't just mass-produced tourism products, trying to align your choices with Italy's strategic shift for 2026. Yes, the cost of entry to see David or the Sistine Chapel might rise or become harder to secure, but the potential quality of an immersive experience in some of those lesser-known regions could be exponentially higher as a result.
Right. That gives us a really powerful quartet to start with then. We've got Japan offering cutting-edge technological novelty, but it requires serious pre-planning. South Korea delivering that high-energy event saturation, demanding aggressive early booking. Spain providing fundamental infrastructural efficiency that unlocks regional exploration. And Italy promising a higher quality, potentially less crowded, sustainable experience, but favoring slower, deeper immersion and pushing you towards maybe less obvious places.
Okay, now let's shift our focus entirely. We're moving away from the tech and the city hubs and turning towards destinations centered much more on natural wonder, clean air, and conservation efforts. We're moving into the great outdoors and eco-adventure destinations. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is that the emphasis for 2026 isn't just these places are beautiful, we know that, but that significant effort is being made regarding both access and preservation, often at the same time. It's a balancing act.
Okay, so this section includes countries number 3, 5, 9, and 10 from our list. That's Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Iceland. Let's dive into Canada first, which is country number 3. It is perhaps predictably described as perfect for nature lovers. You know, the epic landscapes, mountains, forests, those amazing lakes. But the specific 2026 focus is flagged as logistical, offering easier travel routes for tourists. And they specifically mention the western areas like Banff and Vancouver as benefiting.
Yeah, this connects directly back to our discussion about Spain, doesn't it? But here it's applied to vast wilderness, not dense European cities. The sheer scale of Canadian nature can be, well, daunting for a visitor to navigate. So when the sources mention easier travel routes, we need to try and understand the scale of that improvement. Are we just talking about, say, better signage on the highways? Or are we talking about major new transportation infrastructure projects that might actually cut hours off a journey between key points?
Given the vast distances in Canada, particularly out west, it's likely a multifaceted strategy, I imagine. It might include things like better coordination between intercity bus services and the regional transit that serves the national parks. Maybe optimizing key highway segments known for getting really congested in peak season. Or perhaps enhance digital tools for tourists, making it easier to book internal travel and park access passes all in one place, seamlessly.
Yeah.
It feels like it's about lowering that logistical intimidation factor of accessing places like the Rockies.
Exactly. The sheer scale of Canadian nature means that any improvement in making the transit between major hubs like Calgary, Vancouver, and the iconic national parks Banff, Jasper more seamless, well, that fundamentally changes the vacation experience. The sources seem to emphasize that 2026 is the year where these various improvements, whatever they are specifically, really hit a critical mass. They reach a point where they allow for more ambitious multi-site exploration without losing precious travel days just to complicated logistics or long drives.
Right. So 2026 becomes potentially the ideal year for that classic Canadian Rockies road trip, or maybe a multi-destination nature retreat. Precisely because that inherent friction, the difficulty of moving across such huge distances, has been intentionally and demonstrably lowered by these infrastructure and service investments.
Okay, now let's look across the Pacific to New Zealand, country number 5 on the list. This place is consistently described in almost dreamlike terms, isn't it? Mountains, beaches, clean air everywhere. For 2026, the specific focus highlighted is on promoting eco-travel and local adventures. This is what we're calling the purity hook.
New Zealand has always had a strong green image, but this 2026 focus on actively promoting eco-travel suggests something more formalized, maybe a national strategy aimed at regulating and also celebrating genuinely responsible tourism operators. This definitely ties into that broader global trend we saw with Italy, but applied more squarely to the wilderness and adventure travel sector.
It does, yes. But New Zealand's approach is perhaps even more deeply ingrained in its national identity, its brand. The sources suggest this focus might materialize as, say, clearly structured itineraries that highlight only certified responsible operators, maybe even involving things like mandatory conservation contributions, or perhaps carbon offsets being integrated right into visitor visas by 2026. It feels like it's about transparency and accountability, making it easy for the visitor to choose well. And that local adventures component is really crucial too. It implies a deliberate effort to move visitors beyond just the major tourist draw cards, the famous bungee jumps in Queenstown or the Hobbiton movie set tours. Instead, trying to connect them with smaller, community-run experiences, perhaps particularly those related to the deep cultural heritage of the Maori people. It speaks to a very conscious, non-mass market approach to experiencing the country, seeking high-value visitors who are looking for low-impact travel.
This emphasis on purity and local is a pretty strong signal then. If you, the listener, are looking for an itinerary that's really focused on minimal environmental impact, and you want high-quality, authentic interactions, the kind of trip that makes you feel genuinely good about your footprint, well, New Zealand in 2026 seems to be actively optimizing itself for that exact mindset, making it easier for you to be an ethical tourist. Okay, next up, country number 9, which is Australia. It's often described as being all about freedom and fun. Exploring Sydney, diving the Great Barrier Reef, maybe camping out in the vast outback. The 2026 focus, according to the sources, centers on local culture and perhaps most urgently on wildlife protection. This feels like the conservation hook.
Yeah, Australia faces enormous ecological challenges, we know that. The Great Barrier Reef, bushfires, impacts on unique wildlife. So this specific focus on wildlife protection for 2026 suggests potentially increased visibility for these issues, but also more opportunities for travelers to actively participate in conservation efforts. It sounds like it's moving beyond just passive viewing. It's about engagement.
How might that translate for a tourist on the ground?
Well, for you as a traveler, this could mean things like new citizen science programs linked to the Great Barrier Reef, where tourists actually help collect data that contributes to preservation efforts. Or maybe more structured tours that prioritize engagement with indigenous communities, recognizing their central role in land and wildlife stewardship across the country. The goal seems to be to try and transform the tourist dollar from just a passive payment into an active contribution towards the country's ecological health and cultural continuity.
I see. So, if you want your travel spending to contribute directly to tangible conservation work or cultural preservation efforts, then visiting Australia in 2026, when that focus is sharpened and maybe those programs are at peak visibility, gives you perhaps the best chance to align your spending with those protection initiatives. It makes the trip potentially a deeper ethical and educational journey, not just a holiday.
Absolutely. It has the potential to transform a traditional holiday into something more like a mission-driven experience, if that's what you're looking for.
Okay, finally in this great outdoor section, we have country number 10, Iceland. The description here is almost purely sensory, isn't it? Peace, magic, and just pure nature. Waterfalls, volcanoes, hot springs, the northern lights. The source material literally says everything feels like another planet.
Iceland really represents that ultimate elemental nature destination. But unlike Canada, which is tackling logistical scale, or Australia focusing on specific ecological threats, Iceland's challenge seems to be managing the sheer magnetic pull of its pure nature in the face of exponential visitor growth over the last decade or so.
Right, and the sources don't actually list a specific new infrastructure project for 2026, like Spain's trains. So its inclusion here suggests that its current management strategy is perhaps seen as effective, or reaching a new level of maturity. How does the country maintain that incredible other planet feeling when global tourism is booming and focus on exactly those unique features?
I think it's largely by focusing on the quality of its infrastructure hardening, protecting the sites themselves. Iceland is constantly investing in safety infrastructure around its popular geothermal sites, its powerful waterfalls. They often implement quite dynamic fee structures or use sophisticated crowd flow management systems, sometimes restricting access to certain areas, all to try and preserve the very fragile environment that people are coming to see. The sources seem to suggest that by 2026, these ongoing efforts will have further stabilized the visitor experience, ensuring that even with potentially high traffic numbers, the sites themselves remain as pristine and powerful as possible. So Iceland provides a really crucial contrast within this section, actually. It's perhaps the destination where the primary investment isn't necessarily in making access easier, like Canada, but in preservation against access, managing the impact. The sheer, raw, otherworldly contrast provided by the landscape itself is the defining factor. It makes it the perfect choice for the traveler seeking that intense sensory overload in the natural world, assuming they accept the stricter management parameters that come with it.
Okay, before we move into our final section on lifestyle destinations, let's just quickly pause and synthesize this section B, the Great Outdoors Group. We've definitely seen a tension here, haven't we? Canada seems to be investing heavily in making its vast wilderness more accessible, whereas Iceland is investing significantly in making its pristine, but perhaps more concentrated wilderness carefully managed. And then New Zealand and Australia are finding a sort of middle ground, focusing on making eco-travel and conservation participation more structured, perhaps even mandatory in some ways, aiming for deeper engagement. It really shows that global push and pull between democratizing travel, making amazing places reachable, and the absolute necessity of ecological responsibility.
That's a perfect summary, I think. So for you, the learner, planning a nature-focused trip for 2026, you really need to decide what your priority is. Is it logistical ease and covering ground, maybe Canada? Is it experiencing intensely managed raw purity, perhaps Iceland? Or is it about ethical participation and conservation focus, looking towards Australia or New Zealand?
All right. Now, here's where things get, as the source material suggests, really interesting. We're moving into our third and final category, the timeless appeal and lifestyle spots. These are destinations that seem to be defined more by their overall vibe, maybe their affordability, their enduring charm. And they often cater specifically to the evolving needs of the modern traveler, particularly that blending of work, life, and travel. Let's look first at country number 4 on the list, which is Portugal. It's been steadily growing in popularity for years now, hasn't it? It's described consistently as warm, crucially affordable, and friendly. Cities like Lisbon and Porto are flagged as being full of color, music, and great coffee. But the specific designation mentioned for 2026 is the key insight here. Portugal is explicitly flagged as a great country for digital nomads and also for slow travelers.
Yeah, and this is a massive economic signal, isn't it? The fact that the source material specifically isolates Portugal for digital nomads reflects a clear and apparently successful national economic strategy. Portugal has actively courted this demographic, remote workers looking for extended stays through things like specific favorable visa programs, and also investing in the infrastructure needed to support long-term remote work, particularly high quality, widely available internet connectivity.
Okay, so what does that mean for the general tourist, someone maybe just going for a week or two?
Well, that affordability piece is absolutely central. If a destination makes itself attractive and friendly to nomads, meaning the cost of living, the cost of renting an apartment long-term is manageable. That usually translates into significantly better value for short-term visitors as well, especially when you compare cities like Lisbon or Porto to, say, Paris or London or Rome. And furthermore, that emphasis on slow travel suggests it's a place suited to staying put for a week, maybe longer, renting an apartment, shopping at local markets, really integrating into the local rhythm rather than just rushing between sites.
And the atmosphere described the color, the music, the coffee culture that definitely supports that slower, more immersive style of travel, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like a place you just rush through to tick off monuments from a list. It sounds more like a place you settle into to actually feel the life. So for you, the learner, if you're considering maybe an extended working vacation or perhaps even a sabbatical, Portugal in 2026 appears strategically positioned. It seems set up to accommodate that blend of life and travel better than almost anywhere else on this list. It's optimizing for lifestyle efficiency, which is, a key modern luxury in itself.
Exactly. The regular tourist in Portugal in 2026 effectively benefits from the infrastructure investments that were initially made, perhaps, with nomads in mind. Things like excellent, widely available Wi-Fi, even outside major hotels, a high density of quality, affordable cafes and lunch spots, and maybe a local culture that's become more accustomed to foreigners staying for months rather than just days. This can lead to a different, maybe less transactional kind of tourism interaction, potentially more authentic connections.
Okay, interesting. Now, let's move to the final country on our list, number 6, which is Greece. Greece seems to represent the baseline, maybe, the classic travel appeal. The source says it never goes out of style. And the core elements are timeless, aren't they? The islands, thinking Santorini, Mykonos, Crete, that incredible blue water, the whitewashed villages, friendly locals, and of course, delicious Greek food.
Greece's inclusion here provides a really crucial balance to this whole 2026 forecast, I think. Unlike Italy, which seems to be undergoing a major structural shift towards crowd restriction and sustainability, or Spain, which is leveraging brand new rail efficiency, Greece represents that enduring, reliable, almost archetypal holiday destination. Its appeal is just so deeply rooted in ancient culture, millennia of history, and that idyllic Mediterranean lifestyle that people dream about.
But, the critique of the current Greek tourism model often centers on exactly that popularity, the overwhelming volume of visitors in peak season, particularly things like cruise ship traffic, overwhelming small island ports. If the source material is flagging 2026 as an optimal time, how is Greece apparently managing this volume to maintain that timeless appeal? Is there something specific happening?
That's a necessary point to consider, definitely. The sources seem to suggest that Greece is maintaining stability, and therefore its appeal for 2026, not necessarily through radical new changes or restrictions like Italy, but more through robust infrastructural maintenance and focused management of the existing high-traffic zones. Basically, they're working hard to optimize the operational flow on the key islands. Things like ensuring reliable water and power supplies, which can be a challenge, maintaining the historical sites properly, improving ferry services for reliability and capacity. It's about handling the volume without the system buckling under the pressure. And this stability itself becomes key. Greece is perhaps a destination where the tourism strategy focuses heavily on consistency. They know what works: the sun, the sea, the history, the food, and they focus on continuing to deliver that core experience reliably year after year. It offers a useful foil to the innovation-focused countries on the list. It proves that reliable quality and operational stability, especially in those beautiful but vulnerable island environments, can be just as compelling a reason to visit as a flashy new tech attraction or a brand new train line.
Right. So if you, the learner, are looking for that guaranteed sunshine, the proven historical depth, the iconic Mediterranean imagery,
Yeah.
and maybe you want it without having to navigate potentially complex new quota systems or high-tech reservation platforms, then Greece represents the safe, timeless, reliable bet
on this strategic list for 2026?
Okay, so now let's try and synthesize these three thematic groups we've discussed: the tech hubs and cultural frontiers, the great outdoors and eco adventures, and these timeless appeal and lifestyle spots. I think the overriding message coming from looking at these 10 countries together for 2026 specifically is that the year seems defined by quite specific, tangible improvements or event horizons, things that are quantifiable, things that make a real difference on the ground. So, just to quickly summarize those patterns again. If your main priority is efficiency and speed in getting around, you should probably be looking closely at Spain's new train lines, or maybe Canada's easier wilderness travel routes. If your priority is more towards ethical impact and potentially reduced crowding, then the strategic choices highlighted are Italy, Australia, or New Zealand, but you need to recognize the potential trade-offs there in terms of access requirements or maybe contribution expectations. And if your priority is lifestyle integration and value for money, particularly for longer stays, then Portugal really stands out as offering that optimal blend of work, life, and slow travel.
Yeah, it's definitely not just a list of pretty places. It feels like a list of countries that are actively, strategically shaping the future of the travel experience within their borders based on clear investment decisions and a focused strategy. They seem to be spending money deliberately to solve specific problems like congestion or difficult access, or to create unique, timely opportunities for the 2026 traveler. Okay, well, that brings us towards the end of our exploration of these 10 really quite incredible and strategically interesting countries for 2026. Let's try and bring it all back together now for you, the learner. We've covered a really full spectrum of what looks like optimal 2026 travel opportunities, everything from Japan's high-tech novelty, which clearly requires precision planning, right through to Portugal's slow travel, high-value lifestyle appeal. We've really tried to break down the value of knowing the specific focus for each country in that particular year, so you can align your own travel style, your own priorities, with its peak offering, whether that's culture, food, nature, pure adventure, or something else. The ultimate value here, we hope, lies in helping you convert this kind of strategic knowledge into a genuinely optimized travel itinerary for yourself.
And if we try and connect all this to the bigger picture, the broader trends emerging for 2026 seem to emphasize two major themes for you as a traveler, things that really transcend any single location. Those seem to be, firstly, a move towards more personalized, perhaps longer form experiences, and secondly, a continued, maybe even accelerating push towards responsible travel that seeks to minimize negative impacts. Personalized experiences, you see that reflected everywhere, don't you? The recognition of the digital nomad in Portugal, the increased accessibility being built into diverse regions, like with Spain's trains or Canada's routes. It feels like travelers are increasingly demanding deeper immersion, not just a quick surface level tour. So the destinations that make it easier to facilitate a longer stay or grant greater independence to explore seem to be winning. And responsible travel is clearly the other defining feature. It feels like a necessary response, really, to decades of unchecked mass tourism in some areas. Italy's big push on sustainability, Australia's focus on wildlife protection, New Zealand's promotion of certified eco-travel, it all signals that maintaining the quality of both the environment and precious historical sites requires active management. It likely means reservation systems, maybe fees, and certainly conscious efforts to redirect tourist flows away from the most pressured spots. As a traveler, you should probably expect to pay a bit more in some cases, or plan harder, but the promise is receiving a better, less crowded, more sustainable experience in return.
It really sounds like a shift towards quality over quantity, doesn't it? And maybe longevity over quick short-term gain. That applies both to the traveler's experience and the destination's strategy. The countries making this 2026 list seem to be those that have actively committed resources, committed capital towards this principle.
Which raises, I think, an important final question for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Given that several countries on this list, Portugal improving lifestyle accessibility, Canada improving nature access, Spain dramatically improving intercity travel, are clearly leveraging infrastructure or focused policy changes to attract specific, often high-value traveler types.
Yeah.
What geographically diverse country that is not on this list right now could potentially unlock a massive tourism boom in the near future simply by optimizing its internal routes or connectivity? Think about the economic driver behind these choices we've discussed. If a major investment in high-speed rail can instantly transform a country like Spain into a much more feasible multi-regional destination, which country out there that currently has maybe challenging internal logistics but possesses immense untapped regional diversity, perhaps somewhere in South America or maybe Southeast Asia, which country could follow that exact same model and suddenly become the next big travel hotspot simply by fixing its internal connectivity issues? Consider that powerful correlation between infrastructure investment and tourism viability as you start to dream about and maybe even plan your own trips for 2026 and beyond.